The government wants to make electric cars more affordable for Americans and incentivize car companies to increase EV production right here in the U.S. That's why Biden enacted the Inflation Reduction Act this past August. On the surface, the goal is to catapult EVs into the mainstream market. But here's the irony. The Inflation Reduction Act actually makes it much more painful for the average American consumer to buy an EV. On top of that, the act even jeopardizes the 2035 internal combustion engine ban. Today, we're looking at how the IRA is making EV purchases even more complicated for the American consumer and how it's got all car companies scrambling. The Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA for short, wants you to buy an electric car. That's why the IRA includes 2 revamped tax credits when you buy an electric car. One tax credit is up to $7,500 if you buy a new EV, and the second tax credit is up to $4,000 if you buy a used EV. That all sounds pro-consumer and pro-car at first glance, and you might think it's a promising big incentive for those who are shopping for a car, but actually it's very, very complicated. The thing is, this isn't the first time that the U.S. has offered tax credits for electric cars. What makes this bill unique is that it completely revamps those earlier credits. But along with these updates come a lot of caveats. As they say, it's always in the fine print. Well, there's a caveat on pretty much everything, from which EV models qualify to even car buyers' income level requirements. Put together, these requirements and conditions make it so that the electric car of your choice might not even be eligible for those incentives and benefits. Today, the average price of a new EV is $66,000. That's not cheap. In fact, stats show that most Americans can't afford a new EV at this moment. With new and used car prices being high, you can see how the tax credit from the new Inflation Reduction Act sounds attractive. But the fact is, there are very specific requirements if you want to qualify for the EV tax credit. For example, if you're single, you qualify for it if your income is less than $150,000 a year. And if you're a married couple who files taxes jointly, you qualify if your combined household income is less than $300,000. The government put a high cap on income to help less affluent consumers qualify for an electric car and to motivate car companies to expand their customer base. But what if you're outside this income group? In other words, if your income exceeds the cap? Well, if you're making more than the income cap, you should be able to afford an EV without a tax credit anyway. Let's say you already have your heart set on a particular EV, but now you have to see if the EV is eligible for this new tax credit. That's because the Inflation Reduction Act sets specific requirements on EV makers too. For starters, to qualify for the full tax credit, the EV has to be assembled here in North America. Right now, there are more than 24 EVs that meet this requirement, but there are many dozens of others who don't. Starting January 2023, new requirements must be met by electric vehicles to be eligible for the tax credit. For example, there will be a price requirement. New electric trucks, vans, and sports utility vehicles must be less than $80,000 to qualify for the tax credit. New electric sedans must be under $55,000. Used EVs have a price cap of $25,000, but used EVs don't need to comply with the Made in America requirements. On top of that, also effective next year, the Act also requires that a certain percentage of minerals in the EV battery must come from North America or a country that has a free trade agreement with the U.S. There is no other option, and most of the battery components must be manufactured or assembled in North America. This requirement itself now makes things complicated for car companies. Currently, almost 90% of our refining is done in China. In fact, next year when the battery requirements take effect, no electric vehicle on the market will qualify for the full tax credit. This is going to be a huge hurdle and burden for car companies to overcome. And once we hit 2028, qualifying EVs will be limited to those with batteries fully sourced from North American minerals and parts. Now, you could get a partial credit of $3,750 if at least 40% of the critical minerals in the EV battery is sourced from countries that the U.S. has a free trade agreement with. The other half of the tax credit is related to battery components. Starting next year, at least half the battery components must be made or assembled in North America, qualify for that other half of the credit. So let's say you buy an EV just before the IRA requirement on electric vehicles take effect fully next year. And let's say you haven't received the car yet. Well, the IRA was signed on August 16, 2022. The good news is that if you bought a qualifying vehicle before that date, the full IRA standards don't retroactively apply. That's also the same for a car you agreed to purchase in writing before August 16th but didn't receive until after that date. This also applies no matter where the final assembly took place. So if you bought a Kia EV on August 15th just before midnight, you got in just at the nick of time. Bottom line is, under the new act, some car makers win and others lose, based on EVs that are currently available on the market. For example, higher-end EV companies like Rivian will lose out. That's because their EVs are expensive and exceed the price cap. But then there are companies like GM or Tesla. They've been making electric cars here in the U.S. for years. These companies already started shifting their supply chains to meet the IRA requirements. If you're a fan of Toyota or Hyundai or other international car, well, these car makers are facing some big decisions now. European and Asian car makers have some limited production here in North America. So now they're having to consider if it's worth shifting production and material sourcing to the States in order to qualify for the program, or whether it's better to do without. The Inflation Reduction Act also jeopardizes the upcoming combustion engine ban that's coming in 2035. When the ICE ban was announced here in the U.S., car companies across the board were left scrambling to design more electric vehicles, and some had to begin designing their first electric vehicles or risk being left behind. But now, thanks to the IRA, car companies are left scrambling for a completely different reason. Before these changes were announced, if you were interested in buying an EV, you usually just put down a couple $100 for a refundable deposit on an EV. But now that's all changed. Now your best shot is to sign a binding contract for the tax credit. At least that's what car companies will tell you. That's because the IRA includes transition rules. The rule states that any customer with a written binding contract for purchase of an EV before the law goes into effect can still choose to take the old tax credit. And that still applies to vehicles that are delivered after the bill was enacted. Take Volkswagen, for example. They stated that they cannot guarantee that their ID.4 subcontract electric SUV will be eligible for the new IRA electric vehicle tax credits. Because of this uncertainty, Volkswagen sent an email to their customers. In the email, Volkswagen urged their customers to enter into a written binding contract to purchase. They added that this contract is their best chance of qualifying for the tax credits. But Volkswagen is only the latest out of a slew of car companies that are pushing binding contracts over reservations in the next few months that are left before the new tax credits go into effect. Audi, BMW, and Rivian are some of the other companies pushing these purchasing agreements. And they all say the same thing. If you sign it, you can at least qualify for the old tax credit that doesn't require North American assembly or parts. Other companies are scrambling to find ways to assemble their vehicles here in North America, while even others are scrambling to find ways to source the materials for their vehicles domestically or from the U.S. official trading partners. Remember, 90% of EV batteries are sourced from China as it is right now. That means 90% of all EV models available in the U.S. now need to find a way to get their batteries from somewhere in North America. Right now, there are 72 EV models available for purchase in the U.S. That includes battery, plug-in hybrid, and fuel cell electric vehicles. Of the 72 models, a whopping 70% are ineligible for the tax credit at this moment. And when the material sourcing requirements go into effect next year, none of the models available today will qualify for the full credit, at least not in the near term, until they change their production to meet the requirement. If you step back for a moment and see this in context of the 2035 combustion engine ban, well, the Inflation Reduction Act's requirements prohibit car makers and American consumers from moving in that direction. So while on paper everything sounds good, in reality it limits us from supporting the ICE ban. For the 2035 ICE ban to succeed, Americans have to adopt EVs mainstream. The IRA tax credits on EVs is supposed to help accelerate that, except that the eligibility requirements kind of throw a wrench in that plan. For example, look at the EV prices right now. Currently in the EV industry, we've been seeing super high prices on used EVs and hybrids. Usually, used EVs and hybrids are the friendlier option for your wallet. That hasn't been the case lately. If you're wondering why, well, gas prices have gone down recently, but earlier this year, you'll recall that gas prices reached record highs. When gas prices soared over $4 a gallon, more Americans than ever started looking for more used, energy-efficient electric and hybrid cars. Growing demand helped to raise prices on used EVs. So how high are we talking here? Well, over the past year, prices on used cars rose by about 11% on average. That's pocket change when you look at how high used EVs grew. Since last year, if you look at over 1.8 million used car sales, prices on used EVs skyrocketed 56.7%. And hybrid and plug-in hybrid cars prices rose by 30.5%. 3 of the 10 used cars that had the steepest price increases over the last 10 years were electric, and 5 of them were hybrids. In case you didn't catch that, that means 8 out of 10 used cars. What were the remaining 2? Well, those were a sports luxury SUV and a fuel-efficient subcompact model. The battery-powered Nissan Leaf went from being the poster child of rapid depreciation a year ago to the used car with the heftiest price increase today. We're talking a price increase of 48%, which equates to $8,500 more for a used Nissan Leaf than before. In other words, the average transaction price for a used Nissan Leaf is $28,100. Second place is a used Hyundai Sonata Hybrid. Its average selling price is $26,100, which is a 43% increase compared to last year. And third place is the Toyota Prius, which has been selling for $29,700, which is 37% higher than before. Since new vehicle supplies are razor thin, some hybrid and EV shoppers don't have much of a choice other than shop from a dealer's pre-owned inventory. If you're wondering what cars have the smallest price hike, well, majority are pickup trucks. The Nissan Titan actually saw a 2% drop in value. And then there's a full-size Nissan Armada SUV, which has fallen an average of 7.4% since July 2021. If you're in New York City and you're shopping for a car, I got bad news for you. Residents of New York City actually paid the highest hikes in used car prices for the past 12 months. I'm talking 18%. If you're in the San Francisco metro area, it's at 16%, followed by Miami-Fort Lauderdale at 15.7%. But if you live in Oklahoma City, you can consider yourself fortunate because used vehicles in Oklahoma are actually 1.5% cheaper than they were 1 year ago. But now, you tell me, are you planning on buying an EV in the near future? And does your EV qualify for the tax credit under these rules? Are you thinking about buying a new EV or a used EV? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.